at Portland General Electric. I will be facilitating and moderating today's lab on May 18th on this lovely Thursday. If you hear birds chirping in the background, that's the noise in the back. So sorry about that. I have to have my windows open. Old home do not have air conditioning, so you may hear some background noises. Next slide, please. Okay, let's just get into, jump into our meeting logistics. As you can see on the left-hand side, we have the icons with the descriptor on the right. So everyone has been muted upon entry. If you'd like to come off mute, you can use the icon, the microphone icon to unmute yourself. We will be utilizing and monitoring the chat today. So if you'd like to engage via chat, we encourage folks to do so. If you have questions or comments, please utilize the chat. Also, we have the video function if you'd like to be on camera. We welcome that. Also, if you would like to not be on camera, you have full agency and autonomy to make the choice for yourself that best suits you today. We'll also be using the raise hand function, so we can call on folks in the order that's received, or if folks who haven't had a chance to speak, we may prioritize those folks first, but we will be utilizing the raise hand feature. And then also, if you'd like to enable a closed caption, that is a feature that's available to you, and we can enable that. Next slide, please. Here are our operating agreements, and we have these operating agreements to establish norms with our communities. We believe this is foundational to building trust. And in this space, we want to ensure that we're creating a safe space where we've established these common agreements, such as respect and honoring diversity of thought and inclusivity. I want to encourage folks while we're in this space to practice curiosity and seek to understand different perspectives. So we have 5 pillars, I guess I would say, that we are part of our operating agreements. So we ask folks to stay engaged. If you do need to step away, that's fine. But just when you return, if you can come back fully engaged. Be willing to experience some discomfort, meaning as we are all sharing in this space, we want to cultivate a place where folks feel comfortable to share. And maybe some people will have different perspectives, and that's okay. So just being willing to sit in that space of discomfort to move through that. We also have folks, we want them to speak their truth. We really honor lived experience here, but we also know that your truth is part of one piece of a truth. So just honoring, again, going back to different perspectives, but again, we really encourage folks to bring their full selves and lived experience in this space. Expect and accept non-closure. Sometimes we have a heavy agenda and we have organic conversations where questions are coming up in comments. So we may not be able to resolve or solution everything today, or even accomplish the goal of getting through all the agenda items. So just be willing to expect and accept non-closure. And then we ask folks to share the airtime. So just allowing people the space, if other people haven't been as vocal, sharing that space so other people can speak. So to show that we're in agreement, can I please see some thumbs up? And to also demonstrate that we understand the agreements. Great. Thanks, everyone. Next slide, please, Shadia. Okay, so the why are you here? So here are the meeting objectives and our outcomes for today's meeting. We want to provide and share updates on related PGE plans. If you've seen our email, we will be featuring our colleagues who for May, which is Wildfire Preparedness Month. Say that, it's a lot to say. We will be sharing some updates on our colleagues' plans for the wildfire mitigation plan, and kind of they're going to give you an intro to the work that they're doing and some opportunities to be engaged. We're also going to be discussing our partnership or collaboration with Energy Trust of Oregon. There will be a survey asked at the end of the presentation today, and a link will be sent out where we are seeking some input. So we'd really love if everyone could take the survey. And then we are going to open it up to a Q&A regarding our Clean Energy Plan and Integrated Resource Filing. We are going to use that time kind of like office hours, and we know that the advocates and some folks in here submitted comments. So this would be the time, if you'd like, in this open forum to ask questions about the CEP and IRP and get any clarifying questions answered or provide comments. And then lastly, we're going to share timelines and next steps. So today, our agenda, we are at the welcome and intro and the meeting logistics. The next presenter will be from the Wildfire Awareness, and that'll be from our wildfire mitigation plan. And then we'll have, that's going to be Jake Wise, who's going to speak about Energy Trust of Oregon. And then again, we're going to go into the acknowledgement of the comments for the Clean Energy Plan and Integrated Resource Plan, which will be Seth, I believe Kristen. And then we'll go into our Q&A section for the IRP and Clean Energy Plan. And then the closing remarks. Next slide, please. And okay, so as we are getting prepared for wildfire season, and we thought it would be a great idea to feature our colleagues from the Wildfire Mitigation Plan. We also heard this feedback from our community partners that they would like to learn more about what's going on in our other planning areas within PGE. So trying to create kind of like a one-stop shop with our learning lab. So I'm going to introduce Brett Phillips, who is the Senior Manager of the Wildfire Operations.
All right, thank you very much, Samantha. Can sound check, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
All right, excellent. So as Samantha mentioned, want to wish everyone a happy National Wildfire Awareness Month. Really excited to be here. Appreciate being here with the Learning Lab, community and network to be able to share a little bit about our who we are, and then also share some of the outreach and engagement activities that we have planned that are going to be hosted by Portland General Electric in June. My name is Brett Phillips, manage the Wildfire Operations Program Management Team, also joined today by Casey Gaiman, one of our colleagues. So if I miss something, an important point, I'm expecting Casey to hop on camera, hop on screen and pick me up here. So, but we're here today really to just introduce, like I said, a little bit about our program, who we are, a little bit of our journey. We'll share our outreach and engagement activities that we do have planned a little bit next month, and then also follow up and end with the ask. So if we could go to the next slide, please. All right, so high level, all of our wildfire activities, Portland General Electric, it all starts and is defined in our wildfire mitigation plan. This is a plan we submit to the Oregon Public Utility Commission on an annual basis. For our 2023 plan, we submitted that at the end of 2022, and the commission is working right now to evaluate every element of our plan and provide feedback and recommendations for us to implement in 2023. So I know we all recognize we're almost halfway through 2023. This is how the cadence is set up. So we're off and running with a lot of our activities right now. And that feedback from our Public Utility Commission can help inform really the rest of the year and any additional considerations that we may want to include moving forward. In our plan, we discuss and give direction on all of our mitigation programs and activities. We discuss our operating protocols, so what customers may see different from the way our electrical system operates during the year. Also, detailed explanations of our operations during a public safety power shutoff event, some of the efforts that we're making from an asset management and inspection perspective. So all of the efforts that we're making to inspect our facilities and ensure they're wildfire safe prior to fire season. Vegetation management is a big component of the plan, and making sure vegetation is going to be one of our highest risks from a wildfire perspective. Not only just limbs on the lines, we have millions of trees outside of the right of way that we manage that can be, have fall-in risk to our lines. And I'm sure you've seen that under extreme storms, where that's a significant risk to our part of the country compared to what others face. At the end of this presentation, we'll be talking a little bit more about our community outreach and public awareness. So this is a very important part of our program. It's very new for Oregonians, particularly in the Northwest, around wildfire and the efforts that we're making. And there's a lot of confusion around fires versus PSVS. So we have a lot of work there to do to help educate our communities and get feedback from our communities to ensure that we're incorporating their needs into our plans. The last part I mentioned, research and development is really key. A lot of the mitigation techniques that we would utilize to lower our risk, those are extremely time consuming. Those could take decades to implement. So we're actively looking in the R&D space to determine, are there new technologies or other ways we can manage the risk in the short term while also setting ourselves up to really eliminate the risk in the long term. Lastly, I mentioned that our wildfire mitigation plan, this is publicly available. We file this, like I said, with the commission on an annual basis, and then we put this on portlandgeneral.com, so it's available for any of our customers, really anyone who's on our website, to take a look at our plan, identify the mitigation techniques that we are employing and the lessons that we're learning along the way. The other point I'd make is for those who were impacted by the September 2022 public safety power shutoffs, right next to our wildfire mitigation plan, we have a detailed event analysis of our 2022 public safety power shutoff. It goes through the entire event, all the stats and data and lessons learned that we had throughout the event as well. So I'd recommend, if that was if you were impacted or want to learn more about the event and what we experienced and what we learned from it, that's a great place to start. Next slide, please. And one of our key tenets for our program is continuous improvement. And this slide kind of gets at that and shows our journey over the last 5 years. And wildfire risk and wildfire mitigation is an extremely new topic for utilities, especially in the Pacific Northwest. I'm not going to go through this in this slide in great detail, but what you can see is from 2018, when we started getting engaged in identifying and starting to manage the risk, to 2023, we're learning and we're implementing new tools and opportunities to reduce risk to customers in our communities. For 2023, I'll just focus in that area. We have submitted our 2023 plan. We update our risk assessment in our service territory on an annual basis. As we've been doing our learning from 2018 to 2022, there have been some significant increases in our areas of high fire risk. In 2023, as what we're seeing from a climate change perspective, a little bit of stabilization in our determination of areas of high fire risk, but we know that's going to continue to evolve and change. One of the key things I kind of mentioned earlier from an R&D perspective, some of the situational awareness capabilities are, those are techniques we can deploy much faster than our typical resiliency work. So kind of thinking of building new infrastructure or replacing infrastructure, that could be years, even decades to address some of the concerns we may have. These situational awareness capabilities that we've added have given us a better way, really a great way to manage risk in the short term with one of the techniques I'd like to call out, AI cameras. So these are cameras that we have deployed across our areas of high risk. we have shared that information with our local fire districts and emergency partners, where they're going to be able to use that data and information to respond faster to any ignitions in our service territory. What that does is the faster we can, or our partners can address an ignition, the better chance there is for containment of the fire. So that's given them, it could increase response time to hours faster for those local fire districts, which could be the difference of essentially a significant event versus a very, very small containable event. Also identify, we're continually updating our situational awareness with weather stations. That helps us get real-time information to make the best decisions possible. And kind of lastly, what we're here to talk about today is really expanding our engagement strategies for 2023. And that's across all of our interactions. That's public safety partners, that's customers, making sure that we are continuing to educate and learn from them as well. Next slide. Okay, so this gets us to our outreach and engagement activities for 2023. So, and we're labeling this wildfire ready, and really to make sure there's a couple things there that we're trying to get at, is making sure that we're communicating to our customers how we're preparing and becoming wildfire ready, and then also sharing how they may need to pivot and become more wildfire ready. You kind of see from the graphic, wildfire ready, it's at the center here. What we're really trying to do, and I'll just kind of start from the inner part of the graphic to the outer part. But one, we want to listen and document what customers have to say. We have, our wildfire mitigation plan and those operational processes. We live in a state of continuous improvement, and we can learn a lot from our customers' needs and experiences and how that plan needs to change. And we can advocate for those changes by getting that important feedback from our customers and making sure that our customers and communities have what they need should we have to call a public safety power shutoff, for example. Communication, we're going to bring experts in our company in key areas that we know our customers are interested and have a lot of questions in those areas, to make sure that they're having those one-on-one conversations to better understand the work that we're doing, how it impacts them, and the plans that we have to mitigate this risk for them as we move forward. And also, lastly, raise awareness, just a space where they can learn about the entire plan. We are going to be, and we have invited a number of our partners across, kind of in those specific areas that we're going to be holding these events, and anticipation of having those partners be able to engage and really show the alignment that wildfire risk, it's not just a utility problem, it's not just a landowner issue, it's an Oregon issue, and that we're all working together to manage this risk together for customers and our communities. And next slide, please. And this gets into the details. So we have, starting in June, we have 4 in-person events and 2 Zoom events for our wildfire ready outreach and engagement. So I'll just start from the left-hand side. We'll kick it off on June 5th for a virtual engagement in the evening. I'd say the reason, and I'll just point also to kind of the other kind of orange virtually on Zoom one. You can see that one is in the morning. So some of the feedback we received last year was on our virtual events. I think we had both of them during work hours, and that wasn't accessible to all of our customers. So trying to get our virtual events staged where one is in the evening, one is during work hours, to make sure we can reach as many customers as possible. As far as our in-person events, to try to get as much engagement as possible, those are all ending up in the evening time. We're kicking those off on June 6th at North Plains Elementary School. June 9th, we're going to Sandy High School. June 12th will be at Sheridan High School. And then we'll be finishing up our outreach and engagement activities for Wildfire Ready on June 15th at the Mount Angel Public Library. And here is where I'm ending with the ask is number one, with this community at the Learning Lab, if you have contacts or that ability to reach out to others, we want to make sure we're spreading the word. Please, we're as far as our the channels we're reaching out to customers at the moment. Casey, may have to pick me up on this one, but I know we're sending out emails to all customers in our public safety power shutoff areas. We're leveraging Facebook and other social media. We have updated our website to identify each of the events and asking customers to join us. And also reaching out to our partners our public safety partners, local government agencies to promote the events as well, to try to get as many of our customers in so we can continue, one, to educate them on the programs that we have and for them to educate us on their experiences and what they may want to see the same, different, more of or less of. And then also, if you do go to those events, we want to hear your thoughts about those events. So feedback is critical for us to improve. Again, we are a young program. We have a lot to learn, and we want to make sure that we're getting that feedback to help us accelerate our growth. And I believe that may be the last slide.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
Yes, the call to action is those locations, right, were just to clarify, these locations that are in person are within the public safety power shut off.
That is correct. Yeah, so that's a great clarification. So we had 3 events last year, again, and those were located, I think we were trying to locate those events to where we could reach multiple public safety power shutoff areas, but maybe they weren't necessarily located directly in a public safety power shutoff area. So one of our learnings from last year, so this is our second year going through this, one of our learnings from last year was to make sure we're taking that additional step to get actually in those areas and communities. We'll have much better luck at getting customers to show up, engage, and give us that additional opportunity to share and get shared with.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to just clarify that. But also, like, if you're an energy advocate or a community advocate, I encourage folks to participate and bring your lived experience. And, maybe you have family who lives in this area, or you can bring your equity lens. Again, like, we welcome lived experience to help make this process more equitable and so we can improve, right? That's what we're seeking. We do have time if folks have questions. Let me look in the chat. I don't see any questions, but oh, great, we have hands up. Sylvia.
Hi, thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Brett. I know many of those areas have significant farm working communities, and so my question is, I would like to hear more about how you are outreaching to Spanish-speaking farm working communities here, and what specific efforts, what organizations were, if you remember, if you know off the top of your head, what organizations you're partnering with. I assume the events are going to have Spanish interpretation, but it's always good to ask. It's always good to check. And then, so that's my question. And then in terms of outreach, I think it will be really helpful if you like reached out to the network of CBOs that you engage with to see if they can spread the word. Because I was looking at the list, and this meeting is not very CBO heavy, and that's where you're going to find most of the community relations to really spread the word. Like, if you're not working with Bakun yet, I would. But again, I assume you probably are. So that's my first question and then comment. Thank you.
All right. No, thank you. I'm probably not going to be able to answer this extremely effectively. I'm not sure I'm going to get it, your entire question there, but we are are working as part of our strategy, working internally with our DE&I team to make sure that we have that lens and that outreach, have a lens to that. One thing we are doing is making sure for each of our events, including the virtual events, we are going to have ASL and translation as well there for Spanish.
Thank you. And if you have a write-up or something I can share with like the energy advocates, I know that many of them are not in the room, and I can also share with the groups that we're coordinating for the Division 21 rulemaking and the COVID-19 household enforcement implementation docket, so that we call ourselves the energy justice advocates. So that felt like a good place. But yeah, I mean, I would assume that you're already working and tapping with a lot of community-based works that work with the Latino community. I know, like, Mount Angel area, Sheridan area, North Plains, you'll have a large farm working community that needs to be tapped, and that's often, like, that needs to be tapped and outreach in very specific ways. And so kudos for thinking about it, and I hope to hear more about it in a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, and I can offer to connect you, Brett, to Sylvia, if you're open to that.
Absolutely.
Because that is one reason why they are also here. It is a call to action. They are seeking assistance with how to tap into the local CBOs and community in that zone, the PSPS zone.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Jenny. We can't hear you, Jenny.
No.
Yes, you're good. Thank you.
I'm always keeping it interesting. Thank you, Brett. Really appreciate the information. I know that last year during the public safety power shutoffs, PGE ended up having to expand the areas to some their nearby zones. I think I'm remembering that right. Did the company make any changes to how you were defining the public safety power shutoff zones this year based on that experience, or is there anything else about that kind of informed your process this year?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I know one of the things we do, I'm not sure I'll be able to. I'm going to do my best here, but so our defined public safety power shutoff areas, those are specifically to address those areas of highest fire risk, and so that's kind of like those most likely areas that we're going to have to shut off due to potential public safety power shutoff during those extreme fire weather conditions. There are other areas that, and I think this is something we're going to have, I think that we have that messaging out, but I think we'll be focusing on this a little bit more intentionally for 2023 is, there could be fire risk anywhere in our service territory, and there could be the potential for a public safety power shutoff really anywhere in our service territory. But that highest probability is going to be in those predefined PSPS areas. But we will, we have going through 2022, we also will have, I think I just say the level of rigor in going through this as well. I think, with our learning, we have a lot more rigor around kind of that in-event type of additional PSPS. And that's one of those areas where we're continually learning, because we know it's extremely impactful to customers, especially when we haven't had that same level of outreach that we would have had in these, in those areas of higher probability.
Thank you. That makes sense.
That was a good question. Thank you.
Looking in the chat, I don't see. Oh, okay, yes. Looking in the chat, we don't have any questions in the chat right now. And there's no other hands raised, but If you all do have questions after this presentation, I know that Brett has to drop. If Casey or Brett can put their email or your, if you all have an email or web page,
Mhm.
we'll also be sending out the deck in the chat. That would be helpful. And I will connect you, Brett, as my follow-up with Sylvia.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks all.
Yes, I wanted to say thank you very much for your time and engagement. This was super helpful, and hope to see you out there and spread the word. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brett. And Casey, who's behind the scene, his
That's
colleague.
right. Making it all happen, to be honest. So.
Who's in the chat. She did drop her email. So if you have questions that come up later, or you want to get more involved, feel free to reach out to Casey directly. She dropped her email in the chat, and we'll be following up, after our learning lab will give you all the presentation materials and such. So thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to move on to our next segment of our presentation, which is by our Energy Trust liaison, Jake Wise, who's going to provide an update. And he kind of has an ask or request also embedded in there, but he's going to go into our collaboration and partnership with Energy Trust of Oregon.
Great, thank you so much, Samantha. Yes, so my name is Jake Wise. I serve as the liaison to the Energy Trust Partnership, and I'm here to provide a little insight into the areas of joint investment and collaboration. Next slide, please. So the objectives today are threefold. One, we'd like to provide a bit more insight into the collaboration, especially in light of recent legislation. Two, elicit feedback from you all on the 2024 action plan. The action plan here is in the context of the action plan that we enter into with the Energy Trust of Oregon, and then share expected 2024 opportunities. Next slide, please. So I think it's important for us to set the table and reflect on the commitments that we've made, and why we're seeking input, and why it's so important to elicit feedback and integrate it into our decision making. We first began our journey to elicit feedback from our especially our community-based organizations or non-traditional stakeholders within the part one of our DSP that evolved and became more formalized within the development of the non-wire solutions concept, which we will seek to validate a planning approach with the trust around and with stakeholders around. And then finally, the HB 3141 legislation that passed in 2021, which we spent 2022 implementing in the form of a budget coordination memo and process, which I'll now walk you all through. Next slide, please. So as a result of HB 3141, we have created a new process for developing utility-specific action plans. You'll see above the line the 4 phases in the process. We are currently in the Q2 to Q3 research to planning phase, and so are reaching out to our stakeholders to understand their needs and wants before then moving into formal planning and budgeting and ultimately funding negotiations later this year. Below the line, you'll see the work we're doing at present or in 23, where we are implementing the 2023 utility-specific action plan. We sync quarterly with the trust. We've developed 4 work groups to ensure better staff-to-staff coordination. They are a renewables group, a community engagement group, a marketing and energy efficiency outreach group, and the non-wires solution group. Next slide, please. So as part of phase 3, the engagement phase, and in support of the 2024 utility specific action plan, we would like to pose these 4 questions to you, the participants in today's lab, as well as your the communities and organizations that you represent. And we would like to do so in the form of this survey here. So there's a QR code that you can access. There's also, I believe, a link at the end of this presentation. And the hope is that we can begin to better understand the customer needs, and then seek to advocate and integrate those needs into the 2024 plan in partnership with Energy Trust. Next slide, please. Just to touch upon 2 activities that we expect we will be putting effort behind in 24, building on the collaboration in 23. The first is non-wire solutions. So the non-wire solutions work group has convened and created this phased approach, which is really adapted from the non-wire solutions technical process and procedures manual that was put forth in the previous year. And we're working to completion against this Gantt chart. The dark blue represents the initiation of the work stream. The lighter blue just means that the work is ongoing. Ultimately, these work streams feed into one another. This is highly cross-functional work. And the hope is that feedback that is elicited will ultimately feed and inform the design so that we can seek to deploy in 2024. So the effort is expected to complete in September, ahead of formalization of the 2024 budget. The community engagement plan has been outlined and shared with Energy Trust, and we're in the process of working through the various aspects of that plan for the pilot boundaries that were specified in part 2 of the DSP filing. And the resource contribution analyses are being performed by both organizations in an attempt to understand how many resources may be brought to bear to alleviate both grid constraints and address equity needs in those pilot boundary areas. So to double click on that, how much energy efficiency and renewable energy might we bring to bear to alleviate those constraints and address needs? How much flexible load management might we bring to bear to address those constraints and needs? And so in the coming month, we'll be further analyzing those the results of those analyses and determining next steps, which include a variety of different solution limitations and a prioritization of the resources. Followed by the identification and application of metrics, which we expect will include not only community benefit indicators that were put forth in the DSP filing, but also newly formalized Energy Trust equity metrics that were incorporated in UM 1158. Next slide, please. The other area for collaboration would be around the federal funding that we can expect in 24, more specifically the home efficiency rebates and home electrification rebates. These, I think, represent about $9 billion nationally, and the state of Oregon expects something on the order of 100 million plus statewide. And so it is to the benefit of our customers to begin conversations now to understand how we can braid funding. So that is stack federal funds with energy efficiency and renewable energy incentives to ensure that these dollars get to the folks who need it most. I would offer that these rebates are available to households of any income, but for households with a total annual income below 80% AMI, rebates can cover a higher percentage of total costs. So we are meeting regularly with the Energy Trust to understand what might be needed to deploy. That includes data sharing and other aspects of operational readiness so that we can hit the ground running in 24. There's also some pending legislation that will inform what this looks like. But we are sharing knowledge in an attempt to ready both organizations ahead of what we can anticipate will be a sizable amount of funding to support the scopes that are provided in this table. And that, I think, concludes our presentation. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. We would love it if you and your the communities that you represent and organizations that you represent could provide comment via our survey. And if I might put a date on it, I think we would appreciate it by the end of May. But there's, of course, flexibility that we can provide if needed. Are there any questions that I might seek to answer?
Jake, just in case, can you talk a little bit about the equity metric that, just in case there's folks in here who are not familiar with that, like just a brief, like what that is?
Sure. So I invite my friends at the Energy Trust to go deeper
sure.
here, because it's not our metric, it is the Energy
Yes.
Trust metric. But I can kick us off to say that the Energy Trust has been subject to a variety of different performance metrics for a number of years, and equity metrics have now been included in that list. They were required in HB 3141. There are 4 different metrics, and at a high level, they speak to the Energy Trust's efforts to support capacity building and an increase in the participation of income eligible customers.
Thanks, Jake. And I see Alex, you have your hand up from Energy Trust of Oregon.
Alex, please.
Yeah.
Explain.
Hi, everyone. Alex Novi, use he, him pronouns with Energy Trust, and had been involved in the development of these equity metrics, which is really a process that the Oregon PUC led. Anna Kim in particular, a huge shout out to that work with a consultant, FC Hurdle. And so they conducted a series of community engagements throughout 2022 to really come up with these equity metrics to add to performance measures for Energy Trust. So we've had things like levelized cost, some other financial and other energy performance or resource performance metrics, and now adding equity environmental justice, which is a component of the bill, House Bill 3141 that Jake mentioned. So there's really an OPUC process, and then we supported this by giving some insight into work we were doing, and where there might be opportunities of growth. But this is really community led, and there are 4 metrics that are set, approved by the commission at the end of last year, and those are kind of long term. There are 4 of them. The first one is investment in environmental justice communities. This could be through direct incentives, through grants. The second is outreach and education, and really ambassadorship, if you will, maybe just made up a word, in environmental justice communities. So that's outreach, community engagement, but also working groups. For example, we have tribal working groups where we're building kind of trust and collaboration with different tribal entities to help inform program designs. The third metric is developing no and low cost offers. First starting with energy efficiency offers. Low cost, the working definition is $500 or less customer copay, regardless of the cost of the measure. The fourth and final one is really energy resilience, with a focus on areas of high energy burden and areas of limited infrastructure. And so all of these 4 metrics, are a step the PUC making environmental justice part of its mission, part of their oversight of Energy Trust, in our collaboration here with PGE. And the targets for 2023 are really the first set of actual targets. So minimum performance thresholds we need to meet. We can follow up with some more detail if helpful. But these are really about creating more no low cost offers, creating more investment environmental justice communities, and then building out a more robust solar and storage program that really focuses on customers experiencing lower incomes, communities that need some of that infrastructure. So Jake, the kudos to you for helping be a partner in that process as well. And what I'm hoping that we can do throughout not just these metrics, but really the kind of context and the qualitative learning is really put the story behind what's going on with these investments.
Thank you,
Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks, Alex. I just wanted to level set because some people may not know what that House bill is. So thank you for you and Jake presenting. I guess you guys were like co-presenting at the end, but yeah, thanks for your contributions to the conversation. I'm checking the chat now to see if we have any questions on Jake's presentation. And at this time, I don't see any hands raised or anything in the chat. But again, I want to, oh, here we go, Caroline. Click.
Yeah, Caroline
Sorry.
with the Green Energy Institute. Thank you so much. And I apologize if there's any background noise. So I have a question that may or may not be appropriate for this discussion, but I thought I'd just ask and see where I should head. In looking at PGE's clean energy plan, so not the DSP, it speaks to energy efficiency efforts and its action plan and its work with the ETO. And I was wondering if that work with ETO and PGE comes from this partnership or if that's a separate partnership effort. That's my question.
Sure thing. So thank you for the question. And I believe my colleagues who will follow me will be able to speak to the CEP more specifically. What I can offer is that we have gone through a process with the Energy Trust, an annual planning and budgeting process with the Energy Trust for, gosh, maybe 20 years now. Whereby PGE ratepayers fund investments in energy efficiency and renewable energy. And so that plan incorporates all collaboration, not all collaboration, but all ratepayer funded collaboration with Energy Trust. And we expect that to be the same process on a go forward. But I'll let my colleagues speak to the CEP implications. Thank you.
Yeah, hey, this is Seth Wiggins. I'm here to discuss the CEP and the IRP. I would just say that the work that we've done with ETO to characterize what we're calling additional energy efficiency beyond their forecasted values that they provide for us has been going on for a while now. I think it was early 2022 when we started the discussions. There's still a lot of uncertainty about our treatments of that energy efficiency, how it gets incorporated into models, what it means when models select it or don't. But yeah, to answer your specific question, that partnership with ETO has been pretty instrumental in being able to try to work through some of these issues. I hope that answers the question. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that helps. I appreciate it.
Okay. Sylvia.
Thank you, Samantha. I think this partnership, or this is a comment that honestly is more related to the CEP than to Jake and Jake's presentation and Alex's comments. But I think following or piggybacking on Caroline's question, this partnership seems to be a really important way in which PGE accomplishes a number of goals. For example, we were just in a conversation with a group of us that get together to coordinate on clean energy plan participation, and Jeff Bissonette was saying, and I think Rob from Cryptech were talking about, the role of energy efficiency, making sure that as we're transitioning, we don't, or we have a fish-friendly energy system, and that for PGE happens through the collaboration with Energy Trust of Oregon, and so. And similarly, we've had a lot of conversation about how does the clean energy plan deliver or not, or could be better in benefits for environmental justice communities. And a lot of that can also come through the partnership. And so I think, maybe some feedback for the clean energy plan folks in the room is, maybe highlighting that part of the collaboration with Energy Trust of Oregon, and how that really impacts clean energy plans and some of these goals of folks in the community that are engaged in clean energy plans that are not going to have the time to go and look at your order documents elsewhere, right? Like if they read the clean energy plan, like all 40, whatever many 60 pages of it, that's like plenty. That's more than enough for many people who are engaged in this process. And maybe it is incumbent upon PGE to highlight those partnerships and the role it has, and then maybe perhaps deepen those partnerships as we seek to center, values, justice-related values, like, benefits to environmental justice communities, like transition into a system that does not, that's a fish-friendly system. And others can speak better to that than me, but yeah, that's no questions, just feedback.
Thank you, Sylvia. Do we have any other questions or comments before we move to our next segment? And if you do, you can fill out our feedback form or email us, or maybe at the end, if we have time, you can come back and ask your question. So I want to thank everyone for being in our first half of our meeting. And now we're going to move into our clean energy plan and integrated resource plan process and initial comment update, which is going to be led by Sam Newman.
Hey, and thanks, Samantha. Good morning, everyone. For those who I haven't met before, my name's Sam Newman, and I'm in PGE's Regulatory Affairs and Strategy group, working across a lot of the HB 2021 topics, distribution planning, clean energy plan, and some other related things. So I may pop up in different venues there. So what I wanted to do here is just provide an update on our clean energy plan and integrated resource plan process. As I'm starting here, I am aware some of the questions have already gotten into this topic. So I think that'll feed in nicely to Seth, who has, we have reserved a lot of time after my remarks here to discuss questions and take feedback on our CEP and IRP. It occurs to me that it's possible some people in the room are starting pretty new with where we are in this journey with our clean energy plan and integrated resource plan. And so if that's true of you, I'd encourage you to go watch the videos from previous ones of these. I'd also mention we have a lot of information available on our website, YouTube video on there. So there's a lot of material out there. But I guess suffice to say, as I go to my first slide here, that we are in the middle, or near the beginning, really, of a process in which the Public Utilities Commission is working through a docketed process to capture feedback and review the plan that PGE filed on March 31st. So that's the starting point, is we filed our clean energy plan and integrated resource plan on March 31st. And I've put a visual on this slide of the dates that are in the scheduling conference memo that OPUC has produced. And as you can see, the entire process is going to last until January of 2024. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities for public comment along the way. So I didn't put a "we are" here, but we're on the blue to the left. Initial comments were submitted on May 4th, and I'm going to talk a little more about those. PGE is working on a response to those comments by May 31st, and we move through the process from there. There's comments in July with us responding in August. OPUC staff will be providing comments in October, and all parties will have the opportunity to comment on staff's recommendations at the end of November. Staff will issue a report in December with another opportunity for comment on that. And then ultimately, that report and recommendations will be considered by the Public Utilities Commission commissioners in 2 meetings that they've scheduled for January. So there's events along the way that I didn't include on this slide. There's a commissioner workshop in September, for example. All that information is available in the LC80 docket, which I know a lot of you are already following and are already deeply engaged in, but trying to get this information out there for folks who aren't following it yet or have interest in connecting to it more directly. So you can keep going. So in today's discussion, I wanted to provide an update on where we are in this initial comment process and just acknowledge that we've received a lot of really thoughtful comments and suggestions and feedback from 9 groups or individuals that filed initial comments by May 4th. And those groups are listed here. I know many of you on the call are aware, but the second group here, the Energy Advocates, is a coalition of 9 individual parties. Again, many of whom are represented on this call and have been regular participants and provided feedback along the way through the learning labs and other venues. And then you can see the list here. So our team has been going through all of these comments and really trying to identify common themes and filter through it and bring all the right people in from across our company who have expertise on specific topics that were mentioned to try to help put a response together. So on the next slide, I just want to recognize that the initial comments covered a lot of ground. This slide doesn't exactly align with the chapter titles in the CEP IRP, but the topics are sprinkled throughout that document. And as we're thinking about the most effective way to respond to them, we've been trying to group them. And as listed here, there was a lot of feedback, especially from energy advocates, but really from staff, the Citizens Utility Board, and others about how to keep aspiring to make the process accessible and to engage communities and collaborate with communities. And yeah, without spending too much time on each of them, topics about annual progress and continual progress, which is part of the how we track emissions and activities over time. Questions about the modeling and the methodologies for identifying resource options, doing resource economics. As already mentioned on this call, significant discussion of our approach to energy efficiency and demand response, including how we analyze them and how they show up in the action plan. As expected, a lot of interest and feedback on a couple of new topics that were really brought into this CEP IRP as a result of the HB 2021 requirements and the Clean Energy Plan orders from the Commission. Those are community benefit indicators and community-based renewable energy. I'm going to talk about those a little bit on the next slide. Another area that was a major focus for this CEP IRP was transmission and there were a lot of questions about our approach to transmission and the implications of the way we modeled things and the methodologies. A couple related ones here: thermal operations, coal strip, which is the coal resource that we procure power from in Montana, greenhouse gas emissions, and then I sort of mentioned it already, but there was additional questions on modeling details, portfolio analysis. And then the last one I'll mention also is the approach that we're taking to procurement of new resources through our request for proposals, or RFP, process. So again, that's another one I'll talk about on the next slide. So we identified over 100 individual suggestions and recommendations submitted across these categories, and we're working to try to get good responses to all of those. And that's what we're targeting to bring back with our upcoming response on May 31st. So this is just a preview of some of that. Next slide. So to spend another minute on a couple of these topics that I already mentioned on the last slide. And these are areas that I sort of chose to highlight on this slide because I think they're especially relevant to the Learning Lab venue, and they're areas that we think merit a dialogue and a back and forth. And the best way to keep working on these is to keep understanding perspectives from the community groups and attendees of the Learning Lab, and to use that continuing dialogue as a supplement to the more formal back and forth of comments and reply comments and round one comments and round two comments, because these are things that are going to continue and have implications across different dockets and different activities that we're doing. So the first one here, accessibility and engagement. I mentioned a bit on the last slide, but we know HB 2021 has a strong energy justice focus to it, and energy advocates remind us of that, and just encourage us to keep pushing the boundaries of how we bring those principles in, both to the process for doing the CEP and IRP, but also to the analysis and to the resources. And we have heard some feedback that the clean energy plan still may fall short of the goal of being accessible to a non-expert member of the public and being understandable. And so we're trying to figure out how to keep making this material more accessible and identify how we can partner and how we can re-articulate things or reframe things, both to bring people into the development of the topics that get reported out in these plans, and also just to understand what we're even saying in the plans. So that's an example of one where I think continuing dialogue is important, and I know there's been interest in more presentations to the public directly, and we're definitely open. We're exploring that sort of options, and happy to take questions or engage in discussion on this call on that. The next one I'll mention is the lower left, CBIs. Sorry, I'm going to spend a little longer here. CBIs and CBRE are community benefit indicators and community-based renewable energy, which is the framework for assessing the community benefits of our plan and considering resources that advance those community benefits, specifically the CBRE resources we modeled in the CEP IRP. And I think there was lots of interest in that topic, and we've brought this topic to the Learning Labs lots of times, and we feel our approach really is based on this collaborative process. And so we, similarly to my theme before, feel like there's continuing work here, and on CBREs in particular, that work crosses over into procurement and acquisition topics that we want to keep engaging this group on to make sure that we are partnered with community as we do that. I'm not going to say much on modeling because I know it's a topic that likely will come up in the Q&A in the next section, but lots of comments on our modeling approach, and specifically relevant to this group, we heard requests for considering the emissions glide path analysis we did and looking at the front-loaded emissions versus linear emissions trajectories and looking at costs and benefits of those. And then, as expected, I think there's continuing interest in additional generation and transmission options and different portfolios and scenarios that could test some of those assumptions. And lastly, I just wanted to make a comment here on the procurement topic. We heard some feedback through this process, questioning the mechanics really of how we're proposing to move forward with our 2023 all source RFP in advance of the Clean Energy Plan and Integrated Resource Plan moving through the review process. And so there's a separate docket at the commission where there's activity around our all source RFP. That's UM 2274. But just wanted to say on this call, the way that we've staggered the timelines there is so that we're doing pre-work with the procurement so that we can identify projects that we would bring forward to the commission after the acknowledgement decision on our CEP IRP. So we're trying to align those processes and recognize that there's a lot of coordination there, but it's necessary to move the procurement forward timely.
Sam,
Yes.
pardon my interruption. We had a question. What is a CBRE? Can you say what a community-based renewable energy? Can you give like a definition and maybe an example, just a brief, like this is what it is and this is what it could look like?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for flagging that, and thanks for the question. CBRE. So as Samantha wrote there, the words are community-based renewable energy, and this is a phrase that has some legislative history, but most relevantly to this discussion was defined in House Bill 2021, which set our emissions reduction targets, as well as a lot of the context for the Clean Energy Plan and the other topics we're talking about here. To be a resource that provides specific community benefits or has a community or public ownership component. And so we can point a link to the statutory definition, but what we're trying to do with our CBRE approach is identify resources that aren't already captured in our modeling. So we specifically have looked at 3, what we call proxy resources, but 3 types of resources that we think have good potential to fulfill the CBRE definition. And those are smaller scale renewables, including solar and in-conduit hydro, as well as solar plus storage microgrids. And so what we're modeling in our analysis is the ability of those smaller renewable and storage projects connected to our distribution system to contribute as energy resources while also providing community benefits. I'll caveat that by saying this is a pretty rapidly evolving space, and we're learning a lot as we go and trying to take a lot of feedback. So I wouldn't say any of that is set in stone.
Hopefully that answers the
Yeah,
question.
hopefully that answers the question. I'll keep moving and can come back to that if there's interest. But next slide, please. So the only other points I was going to make, which I've already said, the first one is that we'll be working on a response to the initial comments by May 31st. The second point is a more minor point, but it is a next step, so I put it on there that just for awareness, we will be filing an errata update also to the CEP, IRP, and data template, and that's going to be a narrower correction to numbers and other errors and things we've identified as we've been going through this process since March 31st. So you'll see that come into the docket here in the near future also. But the more relevant one is the first one, which is the response to initial comments. So I'm happy to take any questions on this process or the themes I mentioned. Now, depending on the questions, we may kind of transition into the Q&A phase too. But happy to start that discussion now if you want, Samantha.
Yes, thank you, Sam. We have a hand. Great. From Rob.
Hi, good morning. I'm Rob Lothrop with the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, and I think it fits with the community benefit indicator analysis and cost effectiveness and procurement analyses that you may be doing. So we at the Fish Commission are learning how much fish benefit seems to attach to conservation and energy efficiency programs. It appears to us to be kind of the friendliest of fish-friendly energy resources. And diving just a little bit deeper, we want to make sure that the avoided costs associated with your energy efficiency, demand response, and other conservation programs get a fair shake. From our standpoint, the avoided costs of, let's say, a high voltage transmission line include not only the footprint of the wires, but the wires themselves, but the footprint of the wires, which may affect tribal first foods, such as root fields, berry fields, and other resources. And I offer that as an example. There's a benefit associated with those environmental resources, which are important foods to the tribes, but may not be robustly captured in traditional analyses, just because I think people may not be aware of those resources and what they mean to the tribes. Likewise, in our energy vision, which you may or may not have seen, that we express a desire to kind of take the peakiness out of the hydro system, and a kind of setting aside the Deschutes River, because that's Warm Springs, Portland general territory that you guys have fully in hand. But to the extent you might be purchasing from Grant County PUD or other Columbia River dam operators, and relying on the Columbia River for wind and solar integration, perhaps I don't know, but we're concerned that in the future, that the Columbia River will be asked to do even more than what it's doing already, and for wind and solar integration. And what it's doing already is leading to conflicts with fish managers. So we almost ended up in court with the federal government, I don't know, about a year ago on Snake River Dam operations and zero flow operations. So in any event, trying to think through how we make progress rather than just kind of pointing out concerns. I think our concerns are leading us to is how can we make sure that you guys get a fair shake in your conservation acquisition targets and whatever the PUC authorizes you to acquire, that we and if we can urge them to consider some kind of dispensation for a fish-friendly resource stack, I'd love to work with you on that.
Yeah, thank you so much, and glad to have you here. Thanks for the comment. Several things come to mind there, and I think we want to work with you on that too. So we're, as I mentioned, glad you're here and hope we can start a dialogue that we can keep going. In terms of modeling the benefits you mentioned specific to energy efficiency and demand response, one item I'd point you to or mention here is that as part of the benefit analysis framework that's used for energy efficiency in the state of Oregon, there is I'm not sure the exact term, but a kind of unspecified 10% additional benefit that's considered, that is sort of understood to represent non-quantifiable energy system benefits of energy efficiency resources. And similarly, when we in this first CEP analyzed community-based renewable energy resources, we took a similar modeling approach that included a additional benefit like that, that we actually implemented more as a cost reduction. But the purpose being to recognize that there are these community benefits that we just don't have a good, rigorous process to incorporate in a rigidly analytical way yet. So we're trying to capture those by those adders and open to evolution of that approach as we go forward. And then I'll also add, we've heard the suggestion both in conversations earlier this year and in the comments from the energy advocates in Renewable Northwest in this comment process, to, as a foot in the door or like a step in the direction that you're talking about, to consider a informational community benefit indicator, an ICBI, focusing on this, some metric of use of the Columbia River hydro system. And so I suspect you saw that metric is not listed in our list of ICBIs in our clean energy plan, but I'll fall back on the theme that we are trying to iterate the approach and see what benefits make sense and are important. And we welcome the continuing dialogue and hope to keep advancing that through here and through other conversations.
Great, thanks. I'm not familiar with the latter term, but we will become more familiar with it. And I am somewhat familiar with the 10% adder, so to speak. It may have preceded the Northwest Power Act, but it was certainly captured there. And I think, that was a creature of the late 70s and a constellation of forces that came together at that time. I kind of wonder whether 10%, and I think you acknowledge this a little bit, whether 10% is the right number. Should it or could it be even higher? And maybe we can explore that together. We're certainly not going to let the PUC off the hook on this one. Thanks.
Thanks.
No problem.
Any other questions in this phase? And I see Sylvia seconding those points. Thanks. So, oh, Sylvia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I was gonna say, Sylvia.
I'm back. I have a question for you, Sam. Thank you for your presentation. And so I saw in the timeline and I heard you allude to PGE responding. And so is PGE planning to modify anything in the CEP as a result of the comments, or is it more a response to the points that people are making? So should we expect any modifications, or more of like, yeah, we hear you, we'll deal with that next time, or yeah, we'll hear you, we can't deal with this time for whatever reason. So I want to kind of like get a sense of what to expect on the 31st.
Sure. And I may invite Seth to jump in too, but I will say that there's several types of comments. And so the response is going to try to identify, some of it is clarifying questions, some of it is helping point towards analysis that we've already been done, or results that we, sought to make clear but weren't able to make clear. And then I mentioned the errata updates, which are narrower updates just to like technical errors in the final draft. Given the time we had and the kind of breadth of feedback, we aren't going to be updating the, doing additional scenario analysis or rewriting sections of it. I think for things like how do we make the CEP language more accessible, I don't think that precludes us from, trying to come up with a different articulation of it for a audience, or, keeping working on that. Or similarly on ICBIs, we see potential to keep refining that list as a kind of ongoing process while we're working, but the approach is going to be more like the response letter. We're trying to make it very detailed so that it still includes analysis results and detailed information on the specific questions. But Seth, do you want to add anything there?
No, I think you covered it.
Thank you, Sam. And then I have a comment. I earlier in the presentation, I heard you talk about just trying to think through how to present the CP and make it more relevant to different audiences. And I think I'm putting words in, like really super summarizing, paraphrasing to a fault what you were saying. But I wanted to share with you that there's a group of us. I don't know if anyone else is in the room today. Let me look quickly at the participants list. No one else is in the room today, but there's a group of us that have been co-facilitating a grassroots community advocates cohort that came together with the goal of bringing community, grassroots community, not practitioners, not community-based organizations, but people out there in the community experiencing energy, and bring the feedback and the input into the House Bill 2021 implementation process. And our original plan was to have some prep on what an IRP is, at a very high level, and then have the clean energy plans once they drop, and spend some time with them saying like, okay, here's what the utilities are saying they're going to do on this, here's what they're saying they're going to do on that. And from there go on to provide feedback as comments, as words at the PUC workshop that may happen in June, as interventions in different PUC meetings. And what we found when we were trying to execute the part of like, okay, here's what the CEP says and here's how this impacts you, is that it was hard for us to make that case of like, here's what this matters to you in your everyday life, or like your experience of energy, of, your experience of being able to pay the bill or not, or your experience of knowing you have power for your medical device, if an outage happens or not. And so we incorporated comments in the Energy Advocates comments to that point of really, in order to have that community, grassroots community, non-energy practitioner conversation, we really need a document that speaks to those aspects of, not just how this get us to 100%, which is really important, but, why does this matter to you? Why should you take an hour of your time, if you don't get paid to do this for work, to come here and hear this presentation and engage? And I do think that that's lacking. That's an area for growth in the CEP that I hope as you're, and I'm telling you this because I hope as you're, refining how you talk about this, to different audiences. And maybe as you're reviewing the comments and thinking what could be different, that's something that you think about in terms of how that's presented on the CEP. Because, you know, like I was hearing Jake's presentation earlier, you know, like remembering from my times here in DSP, and thinking, well, maybe some of those answers are elsewhere, but like people are not going to take, you know, like if you're engaging in this process, right? If you're a community advocate, if you're a grassroots community advocate, if you're a community-based organization, even that, you know, has this amount of time, you're not going to go and look in 10 different places, right? Like you know what's the most helpful document is a document that tells you what you need to know there. And so, you know, in the four corners of the document. And so as you're reviewing, as you're responding, as you're thinking about the next step, that's something that I really hope you take to heart, because I'll tell you, like, we completely changed our plan. We're no longer planning to spend all this time with CP because it was not connecting. Like, you know, people are like, yeah, cool, but like, how does this impact my life? And so we're completely recalibrating as a result of seeing CEPs that don't speak to the aspects of what's important of people's energy experience. And we really were hoping to see more of that, because House Bill 2021 is, you know, its core environmental justice bill that, you know, was led by frontline environmental justice communities. And, you know, now we can think back and say, well, maybe this should have been more specific in the bill. But we're hoping that through implementation, we'll get to those things that maybe were not as spelled out as we wish they were in the bill. So yeah, that's my soapbox. I'm gonna get out of it now. Thank you.
No, don't need to get out of it. I think that is really good to hear, and I think, yeah, we're wrestling with that too. I think, as you can see, and I know you know this, like reading the other parties' comments, like we're being pulled in like both directions, right? So there's a lot of like, well, you need to do this more clearly and come up with a different methodology to model conditional firm resources for, you know, like there's a lot of the technical stuff on the highly technical side, and then trying to figure out what of all of that is relevant, or as you say, meaningful to members of the public's lives in a way that, like, I personally like have a sense that it needs to be something below just kind of like high level headlines about like PGE is investing in new resources, PGE is bringing more energy efficiency on. Like it needs to speak to how the planning effort works and kind of where there's opportunities to co-develop things. And I think you sort of mentioned this, but a lot of those implementation things, whether it's community-based renewable energy procurement or CBI use and kind of clarification of what those CBIs actually measure and relate to. And like, there's a lot of elements of this that I think, I don't know, I speculate may have more relevance, but the bottom line is like, we would love any input or any like help you can kind of give us along the way as to try to figure out like what parts of the message we should try to make resonate more, and like where it like almost reaches people but isn't quite there versus where we need to like take a different approach. I think we're open to specific feedback like that, and to keep working on that. And you know, like as we thought about that public session in the evening that the commission staff has been looking for feedback on, we have those same questions, like who do we show up with? What's that presentation look like? How do we give people enough information to feel like it was a worthwhile use of their time? So yeah, bottom line is
I don't know your position.
Happy for input.
Yeah, it's true that different audiences will want something different. I mean, honestly, I haven't even had a chance to read other people's comments. I have a chance to like these 2 hours and the hour before is what I get to spend on CEP for the week, right? Like, and that's a position which you find many of the community-based or practitioners, you know, that are trying to pay attention to this and 1,000 other things. And, you know, like, so that's kind of like a reality check in terms of what you're gonna get from many people. I think, you know, like I used to, in a prior life, used to, you know, be badgering the utility for not speaking more about conditional firm. So I know, I remember a sense of those conversations and how important they are for the audiences that want to have those conversations spelled out, and the fact that the emphasis on community doesn't make them less important. But yeah, I think you'll have to frame your conversations differently for different audiences, and it is a hard thing to do. I mean, you're the first CEP, so I'm not trying to just like be like, oh my God, PGE, you should have done better. Like, you're the first CEP. We're figuring this out as we go. And here are some pieces of feedback for continuing to figuring it out. If you have, like the very high level presentation on how we're gonna get 100%, and there's like the 7 strategies or whatever. If you have a presentation for the community cohort, you're gonna lose them. Like, and I'll tell you, I prepared a presentation on IRP, and I spent all the time thinking on how do I make IRP, which is such an obscure process, right? How do I make this more accessible? And really, really tried and used Spanish and used English and all these things. And, halfway through it, people were out. People were like, like someone specifically told me, like, I know you're trying, but like, I hear the words, I just don't know what they mean. Like, I hear you're trying, but this doesn't connect to my everyday experience at all. And so I think, I don't know what June presentation is going to be like, but I think if you want to connect to community members, to grassroots community members, if it's not an energy practitioner's presentation, then you really have to focus on kind of like the experience of people's experience of energy, which I know it's very far from what we used to talk about in IRP, but we're now doing IRP CEP, and the conversation has to change. And you still have to have those other conversations with other folks. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to continue in conversation. I don't know everything, but I'm trying to figure it out too. I used to do more traditional kind of energy engagement and energy thinking, and this role has demanded different things from me. And so I'm happy to share that experience for what it's worth with people.
Yes, Sylvia, here. I will set up a meeting, maybe with me, you, and Sam, and we
Sure.
hang out in the lovely weather. We'll get off site and
Oh, look at that.
and talk and try to get some ideas to build a strategy, because I do echo your sentiments as a person who does not have a utility background, except for like a year old. I believe what you're saying is true, and we do need to go in, like, we need to center more about the people, right? Like from our DSP, human-centered planning, and centering that, and really just why does this matter, and why does this matter to me and my community? So I agree.
And it is a grappling that we're having to do as advocates too, right? Like when we're trying to bring new audiences to the conversation, why does this matter, and how, like, we're having to recalibrate constantly, like, okay, that's not working, what do we do, right? So it's not a grappling that you're having to do on your own. Like we're doing it too. It's not an easy conversation. If we do really want to have communities engaged, communities beyond these groups, beyond the people who get paid to do this work, salaries or hourly wages, right? We're trying to grapple with how do we do that, and it's not easy. It's not clear to really have more accessible conversations on energy.
We'll love to collaborate. Again, we're going to be tapping you, but I'll follow up with you offline, Sylvia, and I appreciate your comments and feedback. Sorry.
I'll just add one other thread to that I'm hopeful for as a complement to this is we are in the process also, as many of you know, of getting our community benefits and impacts advisory group going, which is another venue to try to bring some of these perspectives in, both to capture feedback from that group and also test that group's expertise on how to reach members of their represented communities more directly. So I'm hopeful as that group starts. They've had one meeting so far, the next one's in 2 weeks. That group is getting educated on like the range of topics also, and I hope we can bring questions like this to them for input too.
Great call out, Sam. Thank you. We have a question and a hand raised from Carolyn.
Yes, hi again. Just a quick question. One of the first slides that was discussed in this presentation was the process overview, and I was just curious if PGE is planning to continue having office hours where CBOs and other entities can ask questions about the CEP as it moves forward, and sort of ask questions to clarify questions regarding your all's response to our feedback so far.
Thanks for that question, and thanks for attending the office hours we had 3 weeks ago or so. I think we're open to it, and you know, I'll ask for Seth's take too. I think if it's useful to people and it's a good way to get information out and get your questions answered, I certainly think that we're happy to schedule more of those or schedule them on an ongoing basis.
Yes, I should have started off with thank you for those office hours. I found them very helpful, so would advocate that they continue if possible.
And if I can just put you on the spot, did you find the, I guess we took a little bit, some feedback was provided that like more structure, that was the appropriate approach just to have an open forum with Seth sitting there to answer questions? And I'm curious if you felt like that approach worked for you, or how you would envision like a future one going.
Yeah, I can speak to my experience. You know, I came prepared with questions that were specific to parts of the CEP, and I anticipate that after you all provide your feedback, I may have more questions. And so for me, it was very useful just to be able to ask questions and listen to those who were asking questions as well. So yeah, the format worked well for me. I think if you mentioned that there's going to be a RATA filing. If there are things in there that you think would be important for us to know about those changes, it might be helpful for a quick discussion in the office hours if that changed things that were mentioned in comments. But so just a thought there.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, I'll take that back and discuss with our team. We'll follow up with you either way.
And to clarify that the errata filing is only going to be correcting mistakes. So there are it's not typos, but like just errors in like figures and tables that's hopefully no one noticed, but we want to correct. So it's only going to be providing the information that should be there, not responding to any comments or anything.
Sure. Some of us do really analyze the figures and the numbers, and so, or just have questions about them. So I guess just being open to at least
Yeah, totally.
During the office hours would be helpful as well.
Totally.
And certainly you should feel free if you have, you don't have to wait for office hours. Hopefully that's clear, but feel free to reach out to Samantha or myself or Seth and our IRP at PGN, CEP at PGN email addresses. We're happy to field comments any way they come in. So you have that channel too if you have questions.
Doesn't look like we have any hands raised or any questions. Sam, do you have any last final thoughts before we move into our last segment of the presentation?
Nope. Thanks.
All right. So we have our Clean Energy Plan and Integrated Resource Plan filing segment. This is the opportunity. It looks like, though, we've had such a great organic experience, but this is going to give you all the participants time to ask questions in regard to our most recent filing. Seth is going to be taking on your questions, so don't be shy. Kind of look at this as office hours. So if you have questions or comments, this would be the space and time to do it. Again, though, we will be available. You can send questions via our email, which I dropped in the chat, if you have follow-ups. Hi, Caroline. Go for it.
Hello again. Okay, so this is a specific question related to the CEP. And the meeting today started off with talking about your partnership with ETO as it relates to the DSP. But I just wanted to ask, because ETO is a separate entity, and I appreciate this long-term partnership that was beneficial to learn about. But I guess just sort of put bluntly, does PGE have a backup plan if ETO is not able to achieve its forecasted energy efficiency standards, given that, you know, it did share its annual update with the commission, I believe it was Tuesday, of course. And, you know, there were supply chain issues and other things that arose where they just were not able to meet their efficiency. And so kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on what happens if that does occur again. And it might be a different scenario, right? Maybe supply chain is not the concern, but other things might arise.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So let's assume the demand that we forecast in the IRP is exactly right. And that all the other resource acquisitions that we have planned go, you know, exactly as we forecast them, but ETO is not able to achieve their acquisition. There are two things that we can do. We can either build new steel in the ground or we can buy from market. There's risk associated with both. So new steel in the ground means, you know, dealing with all transmission and supply chain issues on that side. Buying from the market has cost implications because we don't know what market prices will be, and there are emission considerations there too. So the short answer is it's not good if ETO isn't going to be able to procure the forecast of energy efficiency that they're expecting. However, as we'll be showing in our comments that we file at the end of the month, ETO has been pretty good about their forecasts. Since the 2016 IRP, they're north of 95% of achieving their targets. And so there is, you know, some additional debate and conversation that we're going to be having about these additional quantities of energy efficiency, whether we should go after them, whether they can be procured. But in terms of the cost-effective forecast that ETO is producing, I think if you look back at you know, history over the past 5-10 years, it's pretty good. I can also say that you know, RFP targets to go down that, I get that first option of building new steel in the ground. Those targets are always adjusted as we get closer to the acquisition. And so if we are a couple of months out from filing the shortlist for the RFP, if suddenly need spikes, say we get a clone of Intel that shows up in Hillsborough, then we would say, okay, well, let's now increase those RFP targets, and then vice versa. We can decrease them as well. And so if we say sign a contracted resource, so we do adjust those acquisition targets. But to your original question, yeah, it's not good if they don't, but they've been good so far, or in the relevant history.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other questions or comments? Don't see any in the chat. Maybe they'll come up later. Seth, do you have anything you want to say or provide any update or anything?
I have no questions about CEP.
Okay. Well, we don't have any more questions. Just know that we will be available to answer anything, or if you're processing, we can just pause here for a minute to see if anything comes through. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for making this a very interactive and engaging experience. I appreciate, and we do at PGE, everyone's comments, questions, feedback. I want to let everyone know they don't go unnoticed, they don't go unheard, and we really take pride, and I'm speaking for all of us, but and myself, of you all taking the time to actually submit comments and come to our learning labs and participate actively. So I just want to extend my gratitude to you all. As for next steps, we will have our CBIAG, which is our Community Benefits Impact Advisory Group meeting, which will be on, I believe, Wednesday, May 31st from 10 to 12. And then we're gonna just giving you an overhead of what our group is working on. We have our transportation electrification draft filing that is due on June 1st. And then on June 15th, we will be having a transportation electrification workshop at the OPUC. So you can check their site for calendar updates. And I don't know if Shadia, we're going to be sending out information, but that's also on next steps. And then we're going to have our learning lab on June 16th, every third Thursday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Again, you can visit our website. We have a lot of information on there. You can visit all of our resource planning, which includes our integrated resource plan, clean energy plan, and our distribution system planning. We also have a feedback form, but on our CEP webpage, you will be able to find past materials and presentations if you want to have a look back or just go to the segmented of the, excuse me, Shadia has been really helpful. Let me backpedal. All of our videos are segmented. So if there's a certain topic you want to learn or visit, she has very nicely segmented each part of the presentation to make it more convenient for you all. Again, if you have questions or comments or want to chat, please email us at cep@pgn.com. And then our last thing, we want folks to keep participating in the LC80 docket throughout this process. So we really appreciate you all's feedback. Again, my name is Samantha. I'm the Energy Equity Partner. So if you want to connect with me, you can also hit me up in that email, cep@pgn.com or samantha.thompson@pgn.com. I think that's everything. So I hope everyone has a great, lovely, sunny, warm day. And thank you for being here and participating. We really appreciate you all. Thanks.